Oh, yes, dear listener. Yet another solo mission here on Bots, Thoughts, and Drops, issue number 18. This is Russ, scouting solo the trail in advance of Hardly Strictly Politics. Bots, Thoughts, and Drops is great again, dear listener. Here behind the silver microphone, blessed to be here once again. One arm tied behind my back just to keep me from drinking. Bots number 18, dear listener. I've done 18 of these damn episodes. Can you believe it, dear listener? Can you believe it? Once again, we are on a solo mission tonight. We are scouting the trail. I hear some coyotes out there in the distance. In fact, I used to have a pet coyote, dear listener. Did I ever tell you this? Her name was Puddin' Ann. Greatest dog I ever had. And that's a true story. I'll tell you all that story some other time. Anyway, let's get right into it, shall we? But before we do, let me tell you how to find us first. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Zero Gravity Med. Send us email at feedback@zero-gravity-media.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and TuneIn, all four under Zero Gravity Media. Dear listener, if I might prevail the favor, please hit that subscribe button, please hit that like button, and please leave us a review. Find us on YouTube, look for Zero Gravity Media and our God Tier Zero G logo. New platforms truly are coming, dear listener, but I don't know when. Luke and I have both been very busy, very preoccupied, but they will come in the immediate future, and they will come like a freight train. You believe it. Android platform, dear listeners, we're coming to make you great again. All right, dear listener, what's going on with you? How have you been doing? Have you gone out and looked at these new September sunsets? They are spectacular. That's one thing I really like about September. The sunsets of September are actually better than those of August. That's true, right? I'm looking at a glorious one right now, but it is hot here in Texas, dear listener. What else is new, right? It's been hotter than hell for the entire month of August, but man, we've gotten a lot of rain, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about that. Now, also, dear listener, I have to throw in a little confession here. I have been on the horn with Luke tonight for about 2 hours, and Luke and I did some pretty serious drinking tonight, and that is a fact. But I'm actually feeling pretty good. I'm feeling up to the challenge of Bots, Thoughts, and Drops number 18, so I thought I would just give it a roll and see what happens. Now, what else do I got to ask you about? Okay, so the kids are back at school. Everything is kind of returning to normalcy, right? You're all doing your thing, right? So what are you doing? What are your plans for the fall? Are you going to watch the NFL this season? Really? Are you? I am boycotting. I don't give a damn. I know exactly the shit show that this is going to become, so I'm not watching, right? I am, however, watching college football, and Luke and I got a problem immediately for tomorrow, and that is this. Texas A&M plays Clemson tomorrow, the number one ranked team in the nation. I didn't even check the rankings this week. We were number 12, and we were number 12. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's a good omen, Aggies, for the beginning of the season. It really is, right? I imagine we climbed a little bit after our stunning victory last week. And so anyways, we're doing HSP very early in the morning for me tomorrow, right? It's kind of prime time for Luke, early for me. So it goes, right? But Luke and I are going to be a little bit distracted by Aggie football going forward. Sorry about that, dear listener. We will do our best to keep it great. Okay. Now, I skipped last week, and I thank you for your patience. I offer you my apologies. I have been working so hard, dear listener. I'm having a little bit of burnout right now. And it's not that I don't like getting up here on the silver microphone and talking to y'all about things, right? But it's just been a little bit too much. And it's not about the time that I've been working, even though that even is exorbitant. It is really about the density of the work that I've been doing. I have been working 4 computers at times, mostly 3, actually. 3 computers all day, every day, going from one to the other, just doing things, you know? And it's been crazy. And I'm getting a little bit pissed off, okay? And I don't want to talk about this too long, but there are people with whom I work who like simply straight up just don't come to work. And it's really pissing me off, dear listener. It's really getting in my head, right? because it's not even been possible for me to take a day off. To take a day off is a detriment, right? And I do it anyway, and I get screwed every time I do it because there's a day that I get behind, and so you're just digging your way out of this hole constantly, right? So I can't take time off. But man, I've got a couple of people with whom I work who, if they work 25 hours a week, I would be surprised. And it's really pissing me off. Anyways, if I stay on this, I'm going to get so black-pilled that I won't be able to get through the episode. So anyways, so I'm just going to get out of this, but I've been working a lot, dear listener. I've been a little bit burnt out. I apologize for not getting an episode to you last week. I hope that you understand. Now, this week in Stohries with Uncle Russ. Let's try to keep this as quick as possible because I want to blow through the content tonight, dear listener. I want a shorter show for y'all. I truly do. And I've only got a few topics picked out, but it's going to take some time, okay? So I have laid eyes upon both the white dog and the orange cat in the immediately previous week. I have, and this is fantastic. The white dog is looking kind of skinny. That means the little Chinese girl is not stealing enough meals from her parents' customers to go feed to the white dog. But he looks a little bit skinny, but he howls at night, and I howl back at his ass. I'd say about once or twice a week, something like that. But he's doing okay. He's alive. But got to tell y'all something about the orange cat. Dear listener, it goes like this. So I roll out of my apartment I had to go pick something up in my car that I forgot. I believe it was my phone, maybe in my coffee glass. I can't remember, right? So I roll out there. It's like 11:30 at night or something like that. This was maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that. And I roll out there, and I stop and I look around for the orange cat, and I don't see the orange cat anywhere, right? So like right next to my SUV is parked this monster truck, right? This monster truck, right? It's big-ass wheels, jacked up. I mean, twice the height of my car, for sure, right? And I'm like, man, I wonder if the orange cat is okay, right? And dear listener, now that the orange cat and I have befriended one another, right? He kind of rolls up on me like he used to do to people going into the God tier Mexican restaurant across the street, right? And so all of a sudden something catches my attention right kind of to my right. And I look over there, and the orange cat has apparently been sleeping on top of this monster truck, right? And he, dear listener, like straight up goes sideways and skis down, like snowboards down the windshield of this monster truck. I'm not even kidding you. It was such a God tier move. I mean, you know how a cat usually, when they tackle an obstacle, they paw up to it and kind of look at it, and then they kind of prepare themselves, and then they just go for it. No, the orange cat just apparently woke up and came skiing down this windshield of this monster truck. I was like, orange cat, what's going on, man? You look great. And he did look great. So I hung out with the orange cat a little bit and talked to him. And then, he had enough of talking to me. So he goes and tries to climb back up. Tries to climb back up the windshield of the monster truck. And of course, it's not working out. I was like, shit, orange cat, I don't know what to tell you. There's only one way, right? You're going to have to jump down, go back to the open bed. It's a flatbed, right? You're going to have to go back to the flatbed, jump up there, and get back onto the roof, which is exactly what he did. So he took my advice, and I appreciated it. It was good to see the orange cat. All right, dear listener, in black pilling news, so my family, we get together and we dove hunt on the first weekend of dove season every year, okay? And we had it planned. We had it all laid out, right? I have been looking forward to this all year long, even though I haven't been seeing any dove flying in the air anywhere, none at all, right? But we were all going to get together and go to our ranch, right? And go out there and, pretty much what we do is shoot skeet because there are never any dove to shoot at. So we just shoot skeet, which is great fun. It's great, right? Eat pizza, all this kind of stuff. It's fantastic. Well, on Friday night of last week, 2 days before the dove hunt was scheduled, which was on Sunday, we had to push it off from Saturday to Sunday, the day before Labor Day, for various scheduling conflicts, right? Dear listener, We got like 6 inches of rain on Friday night, and I was still up when the deluge came. It was like at about 1:30 in the morning, and it just started absolutely pouring rain. It was shocking to behold. It was so much rain. Well, our ranch flooded, completely flooded, right? And I verified this fact because Luke and I decided, we told y'all about this in HSP number 52. We decided not to record on Saturday. We were going to do it on Sunday. I had Labor Day off on Monday, which is an unbelievable miracle. So I decided to go to a bar in a little country town, little country bar. And when I say country, I mean country, right? So I found one in this certain town, right? And so I roll in there. And I was talking to these 2 gals in there who work there, right? The owner, apparently, and the main bartender. And I laughed so much, dear listener. It was just fantastic. And I met a few of the patrons of this bar and matrons of this bar and talked with them. It was a fantastic time. So anyway, I left the country bar and I rolled back by on my way back to town. I rolled back by our land and looked at it. And dang, it was absolutely flooded. My dad was correct to call off the dove hunt, right? There was no way to get through the gate. I mean, if it was not like a tarred kind of proper county road going up to it, there would be no way to even get there. It was unreal. It was absolutely unreal, right? So, and this was on Saturday, right? It was really hot on Sunday. There was a lot of rain, you know what I mean? And so we decided to go out there. Dad hits me up on Labor Day at about like 11:30 in the morning or something like that. He's like, hey, why don't you come out? Let's go to the farm. Let's go check things out, see what's going on. And, so I was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Even though I had to edit HSP that day. And I was like, okay, yeah. So I woke up, packed my gun, packed my blades, called my dad. Hey, what do I need? He was like, you don't need anything. I was like, I don't need no guns. I don't need no blades. He was like, well, you can bring your gun if you want to, but you don't really need it. We're just going to go look at what the flooding is like out there. I was like, oh, okay. All right. So we go out there, right? And it was passable, right? In my dad's truck, you could kind of get around. There definitely are places out there still on Monday where you couldn't get to, right? But we got down as far as we could, right? Which is down to like this lake that we have out there. And I'm going to call it, sometimes this lake has been a simple puddle, dear listener, because the drought gets so extreme in Texas that it's literally just like a 20-foot by 20-foot puddle. But we've had so much rain this summer, it's like a 2-3 acre lake right now, right? Now, I should give you a little bit of backstory about this. We've been combating these beavers out there. And the lake is created by a dam. It is backstopped by a dam on the north side, okay? And they have, these little sons of bitches, they've been tunneling through it, right? Creating leaks in the dam, living inside the dam and all this kind of stuff. So about, 2 months ago or something like that, Dad and I went out there with, I don't even remember how much concrete we took out there. We must have taken about 2,400, 2,600 pounds of concrete, right? And just poured it in all these holes that these beavers had dug, filled them full of concrete. Okay. So that we made it so that they couldn't get from the lake through the dam into their little warrens back there inside the dam. Okay. So our dens or warrens, whatever you call it, right? So we get out there and we can make it to the lake. And Dad's like, while we're here, let's go check out the dam. And we get out there and I hear water gushing. I was like, oh shit, Dad, listen to this. You hear it? Yeah. I was like, this water is leaking all the way through the dam. It was the sound of flowing water, not like a river, but like a creek. Oh my God. This is a problem, dear listener. And this is why, because this water passes through this dam, right? Well, it could wash the whole dam down. And if that happens, there would be an entire massive great works project upon our hands right here if this dam washes down. That's why we concreted all these holes up. It's a major problem, right? So we're thinking they've circumvented the concreting that we did in their holes when we stole their homes from them and concreted this up, okay? And we're seeing fresh clams eaten all around, right? We see that they've created a new game trail down on the north side, on the back side of the dam, going down, right? And so I'm like, Dad, I think I'm going to go down there. He's like, man, that's a bad idea. It's muddy. It's hella muddy. There are snakes, here, take the Judge, right? And Dad gives me the Judge, okay? And the Judge, what it is, it's a model of a pistol, okay, made by Taurus Arms, right, which shoots both a 45 millimeter long. Is that what it's called? 45 Colt long? I think it is. I think that's right. And it shoots 410s as well. So it's both kind of like a little mini shotgun pistol as well as like a proper bullet shooting pistol. He's like, take the Judge, right? I was like, okay. So I go down there with the Judge, and sure enough, it's muddier than I could have ever possibly imagined. I kind of slid down there, right? It's about a 20-foot, about a 40-foot declination down there. And I got behind all of these kind of trees that are grown up and all this overburden that we can't really take care of because it's raining. I mean, you couldn't even take a bulldozer back there right now. It's absolutely destroyed by too much rain this summer. I mean, we're relying upon droughts here in Texas. Now we have a water problem on our hands, right? So I get back there, and I'm all looking around, I've got the gun out and up, looking around. No snakes, so there's that, right? And I'm like, dang. I was like, okay, I can hear the leak, but I can't see it, right? And Dad's like, okay, take some pictures. And I was like, oh, okay, here I found one right here. It's just kind of a small trickle, though. It's not like a beaver hole. Take pictures of it. Take pictures of the whole thing back there. And so I did, right? And I look around for a little bit, and I don't see much, right? And so I kind of slip and slide back up the north slope of the dam, right? And I get up there, and Dad's like, okay, you know what? There's kind of an opening over here on the west side. Let's walk around over here and see if we can get back over there, right? So we go back over there. Exact same thing happens. I'm like, Dad, I see kind of a game trail here. Let me go through there. I had a bad idea. There are all these snakes here. Take the Judge, right? So all of this happens again. And I go back there, and I kind of hike through the woods a little bit, right? And it's really muddy, right? My boots are covered in mud. My jeans are covered in mud, right? And I look back there on the north side of the dam. So now I'm looking at the dam. I'm not on the dam looking to the north. Now I'm behind the dam looking to the south at the dam. Dear listener, there is a goddamn beaver city built back here. And I'm not kidding you. There are half a dozen, if not a dozen, halfway chewed through trees, about a half a dozen of them already laying down. And what they have done is that they have, after we concreted up these holes in the dam, they've moved on. They moved out of the dam, right? They moved behind the dam to the north side of the dam, right? And they had just enough of trickling water coming out of this pretty massive lake, coming in through these leaks that they created. And rather than tunneling and burrowing through the dam, they built their own dam behind our dam. Okay, dear listener, this is an absolute beaver metropolis back here. I'm not kidding. It is, I'm going to call it about 200 feet by 150 feet of water, and I'm going to say it's about 5 feet deep. They have dammed that all up, and all of these leaks that me and my dad were hearing, it's not leaks coming through the dam, it's leaks leaking over the beaver dam is what it is. This is a massive problem. This threatens to wash down the entire dam, drain our lake, and flood out numerous other people's properties all around, right? This is a very serious problem. So I take pictures of it. I walk back out there, slip and slide, walk back out there to Dad, mud all over me. I'm like, damn, Dad, I don't know what to tell you, but this is a problem. And we're like, yeah. And Dad was like, we should have killed those son of a bitches back when we first learned they were here. And I was like, yeah, we should have, And so we're trying to figure out what to do. Dad and I were kind of planning on just kind of spending a couple nights out there and waiting for the beavers to come out and just killing their asses, right? Because they threaten the very safety of numerous people all around our property, not just our own lake itself, numerous people in their property, right? Well, this problem has metastasized to such a point. Like, dear listener, this dam is, I'm going to call it 75 yards long. 75 yards long, that these beavers have dammed up behind our dam. So we're trying to, this is now out of our hands, right? You can't get a bulldozer back there. There's no way to get heavy machinery back there. So we've got a couple of ideas about how to drain this dam involving some dynamite. Perhaps some dynamite. Perhaps if we can just get a tractor in close enough to like knock out the corner of the dam so that this huge lake that they've built for themselves drains. We don't know. But we're actually now seeking the services of the Texas Agricultural Extension Service or the county or somebody to come out here and be like, yo, we got a major problem, man. We have a public works problem out here. How do we solve this? And that's where we're at. And that is the end of Stohries with Uncle Russ for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, dear listener. All right, let's get into the hard-hitting political commentary, shall we? We're only 20 minutes in, trying to give a short show. Might as well go ahead and get to the politics. Guess what we're talking about first? Oh, yes, Jeffrey Epstein. There have not been many developments. There are not many developments to make, but there are just some interesting little things that are kind of dropping here and there about it. I've got a Zero Hedge piece that dropped just 2 days ago. It says, lawyer for Epstein's madam says hundreds of names contained in upcoming records dump. Zero Hedge. Okay, so you know who Epstein's madam is, quote, madam. That's Ghislaine Maxwell, right? So she has attorneys, okay? Even though she is all around this country, not in detention for whatever reason that I don't understand, she's everywhere, trolling photographs, staging photographs, all of this kind of stuff. Well, she has legal representation about all of this stuff going on. And now we kind of knew all of this stuff because of the Giuffre case, because of the Roberts case, or the Fields case, all this kind of stuff. We kind of already knew this, okay? But I'm just going to take this paragraph, or this piece from the lead. It goes thus. An attorney for Jeffrey Epstein confidant and alleged groomer, Ghislaine Maxwell, told a judge on Wednesday that there are, quote, hundreds of people named in what is expected to be approximately 2,000 pages of documents ordered unsealed by the Federal Appeals Court in New York, according to Bloomberg. The lawyer, Jeffrey Pagliuca, Jeffrey Pagliuca, told U.S. District Judge Loretta Preska Wednesday that the materials also include an address book with about 1,000 names. Preska is considering how to carry out a ruling by the Federal Appeals Court in New York that she must consider unsealing some of the documents. Okay, it tells the story right here. There was no detail at the hearing as to the identity of the people who are named in the documents, and they may include women who say they are victims of Epstein, his friends, and others, also according to Bloomberg. According to court filings, Maxwell was said to have hired, supervised, and fired household staff while directing the visits of dozens of, quote, massage therapists to Epstein's residence, according to the Journal. That's the Wall Street Journal. In depositions taken in 2009 and 2010 as part of civil lawsuits against Mr. Epstein, household employees, and Ms. Maxwell was a central figure in Mr. Epstein's private life. Tyler's, that's a horrible sentence. Sorry I butchered that, but that was on you. Several said Ms. Maxwell hired, supervised, and fired household staff while directing the visits of dozens of massage therapists, typically young women. That was actually a horrible paragraph, Tyler's. Sorry, dear listener, but I read it verbatim. Juan Alessi, who said in one of the depositions that he served as the Palm Beach house manager from around 1992 through 2002, described a basket of sex toys in Ms. Maxwell's bathroom closet. He said he would find them around when he cleaned up after visits from the young women. The document release stems from a 2015 defamation suit in New York brought by Epstein accuser Virginia Roberts Giuffre against Maxwell. Giuffre says Maxwell helped Epstein traffic herself and other underage girls to sex parties at the billionaire pedophile's many residences. Maxwell has denied any wrongdoing and called Giuffre a liar. The case was settled in 2017 and the records were sealed. However, appeals by the Miami Herald, Harvard Law professor and former Epstein pal Alan Dershowitz, and right-wing blogger Mike Cernovich were successful. Now these documents must be released. Now, we've already reported about most of that kind of stuff right there. There's one thing that I do want to say right here. Alan Dershowitz did not file records asking for these documents to be declassified. Mike Cernovich did the work on that. To be fair, as already reported in these hallowed halls, Alan Dershowitz simply jumped on and filed an amicus briefing for the Cernovich documents. Okay? This is the truth. Alan Dershowitz did not sue for those documents to be unsealed. It was Mike Cernovich who did it. Alan Dershowitz did it because in desperation, this man is trying to cleanse his name because he is implicated. Got another Zero Hedge piece here. It dropped 3 days ago. It is entitled, "He's a Ghost." Modeling agency boss accused of scouting girls for Epstein mysteriously vanishes. Imagine that. Jean-Luc Brunel, the modeling agency boss who was accused of scouting young girls for Jeffrey Epstein, has mysteriously vanished like a, quote, ghost, as investigators search the world looking for him, according to the New York Post. French authorities are trying to find the 72-year-old Brunel and question him over his ties to Epstein as part of an ongoing probe into the now-dead pedophile who had a house in Paris. A legal source in Paris said, quote, "He is a ghost who has disappeared without a trace." French authorities have made inquiries in places like the U.S. and Europe, as well as Brazil, where Brunel was seen looking for girls just 3 months before Epstein was arrested. The legal source continued, "There is no address for him. All his internet accounts, including social media, have been wiped out. He is uncontactable." He's uncontactable. Brunel's connection to the Epstein scandal had come to light in numerous, I scrolled too far. Sorry, dear listener. In numerous court filings, Epstein had invested $1 million to help launch Brunel's modeling firm MC2 in return for a supply of girls on tap, according to one lawsuit. According to the New York Post, Brunel may have even sent 3 12-year-old girls as a birthday present 1 year. All of this stuff already reported in these hallowed halls before anybody else got here, dear listener, before anybody else, except the Tylers. I quoted Zero Hedge on this because they've been keeping kind of the flame stoked about this Jeffrey Epstein thing, unlike most mainstream news outlets they have, right? And also they are asking the intelligent questions, which we all also have. Now, one last Zero Hedge piece. 3 Zero Hedge pieces in a row about Jeffrey Epstein, dear listener. Why do you think that is? Why is there not a Fox News piece here? Why is there not a Miami Herald piece here? Why is there not a New York Times piece, most especially, dear listener? And I will tell you exactly why. There is massive intervention in this news market to try to memory hole this story right now. Because remember what I told you. This story really is the most important story of our time. And I will clarify that here in just a moment. It touches everything. Everything you look at in the world and you wonder, why is this so effed up? It touches Jeffrey Epstein. Excuse me, dear listener. My apologies. Right? And we've already argued that point in these hallowed halls. Right? I've got a piece here entitled from Zero Hedge that dropped just today. It says, the title of it is "Nobody's Fucking Business. Epstein Buried in Unmarked Grave." Take it from the lead. It goes thus. Roughly 1 month after he was found dead of an alleged suicide by hanging in his jail cell in Manhattan, the location of the body of pedophile and disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein has finally been confirmed. Epstein's body was buried at I.J. Moore's Star of David Cemetery in West Palm Beach, the Mirror reports. He was buried next to his parents, Seymour and Paula. To make it harder for vandals to defile his grave, Epstein was placed in an unmarked grave. Also, the names of his parents were removed from their tombstones. Gee, wonder why somebody would want to defile his grave. Seriously, wonder why that might happen. All right, so it just kind of, this piece goes through all of the facts about the suicide, But I want to take it all the way down here to the very bottom 3 paragraphs of this Zero Hedge piece, and they go thus. When approached by journalists asking about the location of his brother's body, Mark, his brother, Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, reportedly responded, "It's nobody's fucking business. It's a private family matter. You got that? I'm not going to answer your question." The cemetery is an exclusive Jewish burial ground where plots sell for up to $250,000. His father was buried there in 1991, while his mother was buried there in 2004. And there have been a couple other things that have come out about the Epstein case, dear listener, but it's not really worth our time. What I'm wondering right now is, why was Brunel allowed to escape and just vanish into thin air like a ghost? He is a ghost, says the French legal authority. Why is Ghislaine Maxwell not in custody right now? Things that make you go, These are not literal questions, dear listener. These are questions meant to pry in your mind, to make you ask these questions. Why are these people not in custody? Why was Brunel allowed to vanish like a ghost? Why did William Barr fail entirely on this Jeffrey Epstein matter? All right, we're going to shift gears here just a little bit, dear listener. Now, there's been a bunch of stuff going on with the Fed right now. That's the Federal Reserve. They are the central bank. A lot of people think that they are a government-owned entity, but they are not. They are a private central bank which prints our currency. And it occurred to me that what really needs to happen here, Luke and I have been talking about doing a deep dive about the Fed for forever, but we haven't done it yet. We haven't gotten around to it. There's just been too much craziness going on, so we've never gotten there. Meanwhile, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of deep dives on the Federal Reserve on YouTube. Go look them up. These are by deep dives by financiers, bankers, former central bankers, all kinds of stuff. Go look at those and discover things about how our money is created. Go discover things about what our money is. Go discover things about how interest rates are determined, what interest rates mean, how interest rates affect the currency. This is called monetary policy right now. How interest rates affect the currency. Okay? Now, man, this episode, dear listener, brought to you by Zero Hedge. I've got to say, this is my 4th straight Zero Hedge piece, and this episode also brought to you by Dallas Blonde Beer and Four Roses Whiskey. Dear listener, we got proper sponsors now. Tyler's, seriously, thank you so much, and thank you for your work. Now, dear listener, let me tell you something. Let me take a sip of this beer here real quick. When Zero Hedge reports something about financial news, they are the ultimate authority, right? They are bears in the market. They are very much pessimistic about the market and what is going on with our monetary financial system, right? But they always bring up things that just make you go, and they have facts and data to back it up, always. And there have been, too many moments of greatness in Zero Hedge's history to name. And I was on Zero Hedge back in 2009 in the middle of the financial collapse. That's when I first started reading them, trying to make sense about why the financial collapse happened, right? Zero Hedge explained it to me perfectly. They busted that story. They busted the high-frequency trading story. They busted the LIBOR scandal, right? They busted all this stuff. And it's literally to the point now where the Federal Reserve is calling Zero Hedge and asking him, we can't find that Bank of America source that you just quoted last week. Can you send us the source? So the Federal Reserve itself is relying upon Zero Hedge for their sources as well as a source unto itself. It is rather remarkable where Zero Hedge has come in the last 10 years. Now, there was a crazy thing that happened last week, okay? And that is that this cat named Bill Dudley, okay? He wrote this op-ed in Bloomberg, and he said some really crazy things in there. Basically, that what he said is what Zero Hedge had already argued, is that, okay, dear listener, we're getting into really esoteric stuff, but listen to it, Think about it. We're not going to deep dive right now. We're going to stay shallow, okay? Listen to it. Think about it. If you need to listen to it one mo again, back it up and listen to it one mo again. And if it doesn't make sense, then think about it again and back it up and listen to it one mo again until it at least kind of makes a little bit of sense. Listen, all of this stuff is not complicated. It is very, very simple. Not to mention, the people on this trail are so intelligent. This is pedestrian for you, dear listener. You believe this. Okay. All right. So Bill Dudley came out last week and wrote this op-ed in Bloomberg, right? And he basically argued the point, which Zero Hedge had already made, and in fact, Bank of America had already made, that was that the Federal Reserve was subsidizing the trade war in favor of Donald Trump. And this is objectively true, okay? And you got to keep in mind there's a context here, dear listener, that goes like this, right? Donald Trump has been shouting down the Federal Reserve constantly because they've not been cutting interest rates quickly enough, right? So what Donald Trump has done is he's gotten out in front of the Federal Reserve, which the Federal Reserve, heretofore, since its very founding in 1913, has always constantly been in front of the federal government. Now Donald Trump is in front of the Federal Reserve, and he kind of has them in checkmate a little bit right now. But it is true that the Federal Reserve is supporting Donald Trump's tariff war against China, and that is because they have to, because of Donald Trump's rhetoric. Dear listener, what this president has done in terms of the Federal Reserve regulation, in terms of checking the Federal Reserve, right? In terms of keeping the Federal Reserve honest, which there is no honest Federal Reserve. It's impossible for the Federal Reserve to be honest. They issue debt-based currency, not credit-based currency. Look into it yourself. We're not going to deep dive on it right now, but take some time this week, dear listener. Take a couple of hours and watch some YouTube videos. Just look up Federal Reserve on YouTube. You'll find exactly what you need to know. This man, this president, has done more than people who directly speak out at the Fed, who have since 2008 in the form of Ron Paul, in the form of Rand Paul. He has done more with just his political maneuvering, with his simple mind, to hopefully end the Fed, but certainly to keep them in check. So Bill Dudley is quite correct. It's a very simple observation that the Federal Reserve, because of Donald Trump's rhetoric and getting out in front of the Federal Reserve and blaming the possibility of any economic downturn on the Federal Reserve, which is entirely 100% correct, right? He has forced them to cut interest rates in support of keeping cheap Chinese shit goods cheap for us here in America so that we don't feel the inflation cost of this tariff war, okay? Now, it is affecting farmers objectively right now. It's true. It is affecting farmers, but the farmers, for the most part, not all the way across the border, like, yeah, bring it. End this bullshit that we have going on with China. We need fair trade with China, and that's also a fact, okay? So Bill Dudley said all of this stuff that basically the Fed is subsidizing the trade war, okay? He's right. He copied Zero Hedge about that, but he's right, okay? But then he came out and said something else in this op-ed that he wrote. I believe it was Thursday of last week. That would be about August 31st-ish, something like that. He came out and said this weird shit, that something to the effect of that the Federal Reserve maybe should just go ahead and crash the economy just ahead of the 2020 elections so that they could hang that around the head of Donald Trump and get his ass out of office. That's pretty much exactly what he said. And I do paraphrase, but that's pretty much the story. Okay? Well, dear listener, this stupid ass. Dear listener, you think these people are so smart? Like, oh, he works at the Federal Reserve. Oh, God, he's so smart. No, they're fools. They're fools. Bill Dudley was the Federal Reserve governor of the New York branch of the Federal Reserve. He was never head of the Federal Reserve like Jerome Powell is right now, okay? He was the governor of the New York section of the Federal Reserve, okay? There are several sections to this central octopus. Okay. So he's a central banker, right? He's pretty powerful up there in the Fed. Okay. So without any further ado, I am just going to read damn near this whole Zero Hedge piece to you, dear listener, and I will stop and explain here and there as we need to, but we'll just see what happens. Okay, we'll see what happens. But I want to kind of blaze through this pretty quickly because we're creeping up around 39, 40 minutes. So here we go. The title of the piece is, quote, Deep State Dudley Doubles Down, quote, explains what he really meant in his scandalous anti-Trump op-ed. Take it from the lead. It goes thus. There is a saying, when in a hole, stop digging. Unfortunately for Goldman managing director and NY Fed president, Bill, let them eat iPads, Dudley. That is a saying he is not familiar with. And 1 week after his stunning Bloomberg op-ed in which he advocated the Fed to prevent Donald Trump's 2020 re-election by sending the economy into a recession, resulting in a brutal response from virtually everyone who slammed Dudley's musings as the final proof that the Fed was in fact a political animal, one which is more powerful than the executive branch itself in its ability to pick and choose presidents, Dudley is without an, quote, explainer seeking, quote, to answer some of the main questions posed by his, quote, provocative piece. Now, dear listener, okay, Tyler's, I forgive you, okay? There were no periods in that sentence I just read to you. That was a 100-word sentence, at least. That's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-line sentence, all right? But it was epic, and it had to be read in its context. Paragraph number 2 goes thus. After reading, quote, what I meant when I said don't enable Trump, let's just say Dudley, this is his second op-ed that he wrote on Bloomberg, and I've got it pulled up right here, but the Tylers do a pretty good job of quoting it, so we're just going to blaze through the Zero Hedge piece. Let's just say that Dudley fails in explaining why he is not what he said, and if anything, he has successfully doubled down, giving Trump even more ammunition to throw the book at the political Fed for not cutting rates fast enough as the president has been demanding for months, and for eventually taking the blame for the coming economic and market crash. Dudley's letter, written in rhetorical Q&A format, which is, listen, dear listener, let me tell you something. Q&A format stuff is the most narcissistic bullshit that you can use to get your message out there, okay? And I read Dudley's, quote, op-ed. Oh my God, I've been getting all these questions. Here's this question. Here's the answer. It's stupid. It was a stupid vehicle, a stupid response. Anyway, let me not get triggered about this and stay on message. Dudley's letter, written in rhetorical Q&A format, begins by asking himself what motivated him to write this article. His answer is twofold. First, President Trump's trade war with China was increasing uncertainty about how global trading rules would evolve, what tariffs would be imposed, what changes firms might need to make in their global supply chains, and what the downside risks might be for the U.S. economy. Just a few days before the article was published, the president ordered U.S. firms to pull out of China. Second, the president continued to attack the Federal Reserve and push it to ease monetary policy further. He emphasized that the Fed, not the White House or its trade war with China, should be blamed if the economy faltered. His attacks on the Fed included characterizing Chairman Jerome Powell as an, quote, enemy on par, in his view, with President Xi Jinping of China. As Dudley, quote, saw it, the combination of the trade war and the president's attacks on the Fed, quote, threatened to put the central bank in an untenable position, end quote, one where Trump was shifting responsibility for the downside risks from his trade war onto the Fed. Quote, I thought this was an important issue worth exploring. Oh my God, such a little bitch, Dudley. What Dudley means here is that whereas traditionally the Fed has been commended for bailing out banks the world over by throwing trillions of dollars at a problem and hoping it goes away, even though sometime in 2016 it became clear that this approach was doomed to failure, and so it would be great to have a hapless scapegoat in the White House, i.e., someone such as President Donald Trump, to take the blame for decades of disastrous monetary policy, which has resulted in the world's biggest asset bubble in history. What happened next was not part of the program. Namely, Trump flipping the table on the Fed and making it the key catalyst for the upcoming U.S. recession. Indeed, one can say that Trump, painted daily as a bumbling buffoon by his enemies and sometimes even his friends, has in fact played his cards perfectly, demanding the Fed cut rates well into late 2018, something which the Fed eventually did, and giving Trump all the leverage and claiming that he was in fact right and the Fed was wrong. Certainly, with the market now expecting 4 or more rate cuts by the end of 2020 and tying the fate of the S&P to this expectation being fulfilled, one can argue that Trump will even be more right and that the Fed, who can forget Powell's famous statement that we are, quote, long way from neutral less than a year ago when the Fed chair was still hawkish, was not only wrong, but also clueless. As such, one can counter Dudley's rambling, defensive op-ed part 2 published today in Bloomberg by simply pointing out that the reason the former Goldman banker's anger is not so much Trump's trade war with China, which increasingly affects more Americans which increasingly more Americans agree with and even Trump's enemies concede was long overdue, nor Trump's, quote, attacks on Fed independence. Of course, the Fed was never actually independent, as anyone who remembers how LBJ literally attacked a Fed chairman in 1965, true story, demanding more money, knows very well. But because Trump managed to quickly and effectively outsmart the Fed and box the Fed chairman so that the Fed is now forced to underwrite Trump's trade war, as we explained first 1 month ago. And I'm looking at a graph here right now, dear listener. More tariffs lead to economy, market weakens, leads to Fed eases monetary policy, leads to economy, market strengthens, leads to more tariffs, leads to economy, market weakens, leads to Fed eases monetary policy, leads to economy, market strengthens. And thus Donald Trump has put the Federal Reserve into a feedback loop from which it cannot escape and cannot hope to, because the president happens to be right. Let's get back with this piece. So apparently unable to express what he meant the first time around and sparking a firestorm of criticism, what was Dudley's oh-so-complicated message that was lost in translation? First, the Fed needs to be cautious that it does not inadvertently enable the president's trade war with China. As I wrote, quote, what if the Fed's accommodation encourages the president to escalate the trade war further, increasing the risk of recession? The central bank's efforts to cushion the blow might not be merely ineffectual, they might actually make things worse. Imagine that. Imagine that. In my judgment, there is a risk that the Fed, by easing, might encourage the president to take even more aggressive actions on trade and in raising tariffs. This might not create even greater downside risks for the economy that monetary policy might prove ill-suited to address. One can argue that is a credible complaint. The only problem is Dudley should be addressing his anger not at Trump, but at Chairman Jerome Powell, who certified before the world that any further escalation in Trump's trade war are effectively a justification for more rate cuts for one simple reason. The U.S. economy was doing well enough not to need a rate cut, yet the Fed, having become the world's central bank, not just the United States central bank, the world's central bank, desperately needed a pretext to cut and found one in Trump's trade war. Whether or not this was Powell's intention is unclear. Although, as we said at the time, it certainly means that Trump is now de facto in charge of the Fed's monetary policy by way of U.S. foreign policy. And it also means that, as Bank of America wrote, quote, the Fed is unintentionally underwriting the trade war. Now, before we go any further with this piece, dear listener, there's something that I have to explain to you about the Fed, about the central bank. The central bank insists, virtue signals, that it is agnostic politically, that it is not a political entity, even though These sumbitches print up our currency. Our currency, according to the Constitution, is supposed to be printed by Congress, by Congressional House of Representatives authorization. That power was co-opted by the Federal Reserve in 1913 in their charter, and we essentially, as a government, outsourced the printing of our currency to a private bank. Not a government entity at all, to a private bank. And in exchange for this power that we gave to them over our currency, essentially what the Fed said in 1913, we promise, really, we do, we'll never be political. Oh my God, we're just going to handle the currency. We're not going to go right wing or left wing or anything like that. We're just going to handle the currency. Bullshit. Every last bit of it is bullshit. The Fed is the ultimate political entity, as evidenced by Bill Dudley's op-ed in Bloomberg last week, where he said, yeah, you know what? I think that probably what the Fed should do right now is crash the economy so that Donald Trump loses the election and this trade war ends. Keep in mind, dear listener, who was it that created this trade war? Who was it? Why, it was the Federal Reserve. In the guise of characters like Alan Greenspan. Not the trade war, I'm sorry. This shit-ass trade situation that we're in with China right now, where they have harvested all of our jobs out of the United States, sell us cheap shit in return, right? In the quote of, oh, we need these cheap Chinese goods. Who was it that brokered this deal? Well, it was Wall Street. And it was in the guise of people like Larry Summers, Alan Greenspan. Y'all know those names? Y'all know who they are? They're former heads of the Federal Reserve, right? This all was kind of orchestrated in the Clinton years, right? And it also continued into the Bush years. To a large extent, it really continued into the Obama years. All of these presidents were down with it. What has happened now is that we have a president who is like, yeah, who gets it, who honestly gets it. And it's just like, yeah, this is the end of this right now. We're not going to have our middle class and our country entirely ripped off by these Chinese in the form of trade, which is our fault anyway. Once again, as the Tylers are saying in this piece right here, President Trump has been right about this since 2015. And buffoon though they may call him, balloons though they may raise to mock him, he was always correct. He was always the smart guy in the room. Let's get back with this piece. Of course, what Dudley is concerned about is not the trade war itself, but how it could implicate the Federal Reserve as the global economy continues to grind to a halt. And he says, quote, the Fed's problems might not end there. Not only might the Fed be unable to rescue the economy, but it might also be blamed for the economy's poor performance. The risk is higher because of the president's ongoing attacks on the Fed. Oh my God! This risk is higher because of the president's ongoing, reread that. This is a point he echoes toward the end of the article, writing, I don't think the Fed should be attacked for the economy's performance when the president's own actions are creating the downside risks. Bingo. That's it right there. The quote, risk that the Fed may be blamed for not just the economy's poor performance, but that the great unwashed masses might one day wake up and realize that the reason why the global financial system is facing a crisis of monumental proportions has nothing to do with Donald Trump, who is merely a vessel and a symptom of a broken system, and it has everything to do with a central bank which, ever since its creation in 1913, had only one purpose: to make the rich richer and perpetuate a broken monetary system. This is why Dudley is so very much on edge. After all, those same great unwashed masses following the moment of epiphany may pay Dudley a visit in his mansion and demand an explanation of their own why everything has gone to hell, as it almost certainly will after the next recession. Once one realizes that this is the true motive behind not just today's Dudley article, but also his prior op-ed, then everything falls into place, including Dudley's hint that the Fed's actions will affect the political outcome in 2020. Addressing what was arguably the most sensitive aspect of his original op-ed, namely the conclusion which suggested that the Fed should throw the economy into recession just to prevent Trump's reelection, to wit, here's the quote,
There isn't even an argument that the election itself falls within the Fed's purview. After all, Trump's re-election arguably presents the threat to the U.S. and the global economy, to the Fed's independence, and its ability to achieve its employment and inflation objectives. If the goal of monetary policy is to achieve the best long-term economic outcome, then the Fed officials should consider how their decisions will affect the political outcome of 2020. Oh my God!
Can y'all believe this? This is the apolitical Fed. This is the apolitical Fed, which, yeah, we'll just take control of your currency, but we won't get political. In the words of Lord Rothschild, I care not for a nation's laws if I can control that nation's currency. Look it up. Don't believe me. It was a paraphrase, not a direct quote. Dudley says that his intention was, quote, not to be provocative. So what was his intention if not to bring attention to the fact that, contrary to countless lies, the Fed was never independent? He explains, I was exploring where logic might take you if you started with two premises. Number one, President Trump's trade war was likely to be bad for the U.S. economy. And number two, the Fed's goal is to achieve the best long-term economic outcome with respect to employment and inflation. In such circumstances, how should the Fed behave? And what should it consider? I was suggesting that if the Fed pushed back, that it might be able to achieve a better economic outcome. I was not suggesting that the Fed should do so regardless of the consequences for the economy, or that it should stand by and allow a recession. And I was not trying to suggest that the Fed should take sides in the upcoming election. Bullshit, you son of a bitch, Bill Dudley. That's exactly what you said. And for you to backtrack on it right now is a damned lie. That is an absolute lie. And it is laying bare right in your rhetoric in op-ed number 2, you dumbass. You absolute dumbass. Back to the zero hedge piece, and this is the Tylers talking right now. So, Dudley's point is that the Fed is not political, and yet it should push back on the president's decisions to achieve a better economic outcome. A quick question here. Better for whom? The banks, which were the only beneficiaries of Federal Reserve policies for the past decade, or the 0.01% who got richer and richer since the financial crisis as the U.S. middle class disappeared? And then there is the question of what mandate does the Fed have, in Dudley's eyes, to one-up the president when it comes to the best economic outcome? Actually, an even simpler question. Who, quote, elected the Fed? And whose just interest does the Fed represent? Maybe for the third part of his increasingly surreal op-ed series, this is God tier, Bill Dudley can start with a discussion of just how the Fed, an entity which, as Bernanke's former advisor once said, quote, people would be stunned to know the extent to which the Fed is privately owned, oh my God, represents the interests of the majority of Americans. Then again, we doubt there will be a part 3, as by this point, the backpedaling in Dudley's, quote, explainer was so furious, not even he had any idea what he was trying to say in the following Q&A, as the following Q&A confirms. All right, we're not going to read this Q&A crap. We're not going to read that. Let me skip down here in the piece a little bit. Yeah, let's get back to the Tylers. So, on the first topic, whether the Fed has been politicized, Dudley answers, in my view, President Trump's persistent attacks on the Fed have politicized the central bank. People now wonder whether the president's attacks are influencing the Fed's decisions. For example, if the Fed eases monetary policy further at its upcoming September policy-making meeting, people are likely to wonder about the motivation. Is it certain about the Fed economic I'm starting to butcher it. Let me slow down a little bit, dear listener. Is it certain about the economic outlook or the president's attacks on the Fed? In contrast, I don't believe the Fed is politicized in the sense that it would consider trying to influence election outcomes. You son of a bitch. That's exactly what you just said. Now we're back here with the Tylers. I quoted from this cuck Dudley just to give you a little bit of context. We're back into Tyler Durden's commentary. Here we go. Once again, the Fed was always politicized. See LBJ versus William Chesney Martin and countless other examples of presidents bossing Fed chairs around. I would also argue Andrew Jackson, but it wasn't called the Federal Reserve back then. But it desperately tried to deflect attention from this to avoid being called into Congress at any time the leading political party needed lower rates to pursue a voter-friendly agenda, when the Fed will no longer be an independent entity in any capacity and will be tasked with monetizing all the debt the U.S. issues to pursue its green new stupidity. Let me read that sentence one mo again. But it desperately tried to deflect attention from this to avoid being called into Congress at any time the leading political party needed lower rates to pursue a voter-friendly agenda, as will be the case with the helicopter money. Oh, I missed that sentence. My bad. As will be the case with helicopter money, aka MMT, in a few years, when the Fed will no longer be an independent entity in any capacity and will be tasked with monetizing all the debt the U.S. issues to pursue its green new death. However, where Dudley made a catastrophic fuck-up is by himself, suggesting that the Fed should not only try, but succeed in influencing an election outcome. It is this potential that sparked the outcry from both Democrats and Republicans, both Austrians and Keynesians alike, as that level of truth only emerges during periods of tremendous shock. And if nothing else, the second Dudley op-ed confirms that Dudley was indeed in, quote, shock when he wrote his first Bloomberg column. And just in case there was any doubt, we leave readers with Dudley's conclusion, one in which the former NY Fed president said that while there may be a, quote, deep state or a conspiracy, he's a part of neither. This article is mine and mine alone. Let me do it in Dudley voice.
This article is mine and mine alone. Fed officials were not involved in any way. There is no deep state or conspiracy that I'm a part of. Fed officials are not using me as a vehicle to signal their unhappiness with the president's attack on the central bank and on the chairman's power. Oh my God!
And the absolute punchline.
I wrote the article to express my concern that the president had placed the negative economic consequences of the trade war at the feet of the Fed, and that the Fed officials had not pushed back against him more forcibly.
Which is amusing because after all of those contradictory words, Dudley leaves his readers where they started, asking him how the Fed should push back more forcibly against the president, one which the Fed can prevent from getting reelected, as Dudley himself admitted last week, if it only chooses, but it would never choose to do so as it is so apolitical. It should push to,
quote, achieve a better economic outcome than the one sought by the president.
In short, if Dudley had dug the hole 6 feet deep with his original op-ed, he added a good more 6 feet with the sequel. We can't wait to see what Deep State Dudley does for part 3. Zero hedge. Some choppy sentences in there, some long sentences, an absolute work of art. Absolute work of art. Dear listener, so it was not an apology to her in op-ed number 2. It was a double down of his premises in op-ed number 1, confirming the fact that the Fed is not an apolitical entity whatsoever, that he is advocating the Fed, his buddies, of whom he knows all of them who work at the Fed, in all branches of the Fed, to wreck the economy and hang it around the head of the president so that he loses the election. That is exactly what he is advocating. And he turns around and is like, I'm just saying. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying. What a stupid ass Bill Dudley. What a pile of shit you just stepped into. Do you understand what you just did, Bill Dudley? You red-pilled both Democrats and Republicans alike that the Federal Reserve is not apolitical, that it has always influenced political policy, that it is a political instrument that is privately held, unelected, rigs economies, and rigs elections. You have done more than Ron Paul ever could. And actually, I will say that Tyler Durden at Zero Hedge has done even more than you by explicating your bullshit so perfectly that it is undeniable. Thanks, Bill Dudley. Appreciate it. Man, you should run for Republican president someday, Bill Dudley. I mean that. Actually, just run as a Democrat. That would be better. It'd be more suiting. All right, dear listener, I got one more topic and then I want to get up out of here. Okay. Now, I want to talk about a little bit more thematically this time, not so topically, but a little bit thematically about the Attorney General, William Barr. Okay. I'm going to start with a Daily Caller piece that dropped on the 29th of August. Okay. And this is what happened with James Comey. Okay. Y'all remember what happened is that the Inspector General, we talked a little bit about it previously in these hallowed halls, right? The Inspector General wrote a report saying that James Comey did not break the law, but he was guilty of breaking FBI policy by leaking notes that he took with his meetings with Donald Trump to his buddy, the lawyer, with the intention of leaking them to the Washington Post and the New York Times. William Barr decided to not prosecute that case. Okay. Now, Joe DeGeneva and Victoria Tensing, right? They think that this is a good thing because this case would probably have to be prosecuted in D.C., and they think that it's not an airtight case. They think that it's better to go ahead and wait for a bigger case, which is the FISA abuse case. Nonetheless, this is factually a ball that William Barr just dropped completely. Okay. Jeffrey Epstein, as I said earlier in the show, we're talking about it now. This is another ball that William Barr dropped, and it's rather curious that Jeffrey Epstein's first job at the Dalton School, well, at that job, he was hired by William Barr's father. Now, it may be coincidental. I don't believe in coincidences, dear listener. There are no coincidences, right? But this is also a ball that William Barr dropped, right? Jeffrey Epstein's death itself is upon William Barr. That was ultimately his responsibility. But what was more importantly William Barr's responsibility was his getting justice for these hundreds, if not thousands of girls whom Jeffrey Epstein raped when they were children. And he dropped it. And despite everything he said about, we're still going to be investigating this, we're going to get to the bottom of it, we're going to get justice for these victims, nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Ghislaine Maxwell is disappearing like a ghost. What's his name? That fashion modeling agency. I can't even remember his name. I'm so triggered right now. What's his damn name? Brunel. Jean-Luc Brunel, right? He's disappeared like a ghost. Whose fault is this? That's William Barr's fault. William Barr is in charge of the DOJ. The biggest one major component of the DOJ is the FBI. Yes, it's on the FBI more than anybody else. Whose responsibility is that? Who does the FBI report to? William Barr. Okay? Now, I am willing, Victoria Tensing and Joe DeGeneva are a lot smarter than I am, and they're willing to be patient with William Barr right now. My own mother is willing to be patient with William Barr right now because she is so reassured by, what does she call it? Joe and Vicky is what she calls them. And I love Joe DeGeneva and Victoria Tensing. I love them so much, right? If they're willing to be patient, okay, I'll cut a little bit of slack, right? Dear listener, I'm telling you, with what I see with my own two damn eyes, things are not getting done. In fact, in this time, with what's going on right now, this may rise to the level of Jeff Sessions recusing himself from Spygate. I'm not liking what I see a little bit. Now, there are a lot of people with a lot more inside information than I have, okay? They may know things that I don't. They certainly have legal opinions that are far superior to my own, okay? Nonetheless, I see what I see, and I don't like it. Shit is getting through the cracks. Too much shit is getting through the cracks. This is very unfortunate. This is going to become a problem because, as I told you, Jeffrey Epstein was the biggest story of our time, and William Barr failed. Actually, the biggest story of all time, of the last century, is the Federal Reserve, which we hope that you understand enough about. If not, red pill yourself about some simple things, dear listener. You're so damn smart, you're going to get it like that. Don't worry about it. It's not complicated. That Tyler Durden article was not complicated. It's all very simple. Just go look a couple things up. If you don't get it, listen to the bit again. It'll come to you. Don't sweat it because you're smart. You're also smart enough to see what I see. And that is that William Barr is not getting the job done. Now, listen, man, I like William Barr. I really, truly respect William Barr. I'm results-based as a person, as a business person, and all of these types of things, dear listener, and I'm not seeing the work getting done. Now, let's move on a little bit. Did y'all hear about Greg Craig? Did y'all hear about that this week? I want to take a Gateway Pundit piece that broke 2-3 days ago. Take it from the lead. The title of the piece is Breaking. Obama's White House counsel Greg Craig found not guilty in Ukraine lobbying case. Take it from the lead. It goes thus. Obama's former White House counsel Greg Craig was acquitted on Wednesday after a federal jury deliberated for a mere 4 hours. This is our two-tier justice system playing out in real time. Manafort is in prison, but Greg Craig, a high-profile Democrat, walks free. Greg Craig was facing one charge on a felony false statement related to his lobbying work in Ukraine after corrupt Obama judge Amy Berman Jackson dropped the second charge against Greg Craig. As already reported in these hallowed halls of Bots, Thoughts, and Drops number 17, Greg Craig was indicted by a federal grand jury in April on charges stemming from Mueller's probe related to work he did for Ukraine in 2012. Craig, 74, served as legal counsel for Obama from 2009 to 2010 and worked as a senior legal counsel to Bill Clinton during his impeachment. Craig was a partner in the law firm. All right. We'll just drop it right there. Y'all get the situation here, right, dear listener? Okay. Paul Manafort rots in solitary confinement right now. Greg Craig is acquitted. Tony Podesta is never arrested nor tried, and he was Paul Manafort's business partner, for God's sake. This is simple. This is simple. Y'all remember Maria Butina? She's in jail for the same thing right now. We've talked about her. She was the one the CEO of Overstock.com got involved with, right? She's in jail in Florida right now. Not in solitary, I don't think. She is released in October for a FARA violation, right? And it was not anywhere near as egregious as Greg Craig's. Not anywhere near that. She was just trying to make relationships between Russia and the United States greater. That's all she was trying to do, right? And her ass sits downtown right now on a cockamamie firearms charge and a FARA violation, just like Paul Manafort, who rots in solitary confinement. Now, right-wing pundits this week took the white pill about this. Oh, this is such great news because this just shows if Greg Craig is not guilty, well, then that means that this is really an over-trumped-up charge against Paul Manafort. Well, okay, yeah, you could argue it that way, right? You could also look at it in reality. You could also take the black pill about this, and that is this. Paul Manafort's ass sits downtown and rots in solitary confinement, and Greg Craig is let off scot-free. Is Paul Manafort going to be exonerated because Greg Craig was exonerated? No, it's not going to happen. They're going to hold him and he's going to sit downtown. Now listen, as I've always said, Paul Manafort is a scumbag. He's not my type of dude, right? When Donald Trump brought him on as campaign manager, I was like, damn, okay, well, all right. I guess he's our scumbag now, right? I've never had anything for Paul Manafort. I'm certain he is guilty of many more things than this FARA violation for which he went downtown. But literally, Greg Craig was guilty of the same violation in interest of the same client, which was the Ukraine government. Okay? Now, yeah, I suppose you can spin this, call it a white pill. Oh, yeah, this is great. William Barr's doing the work. No, he's not. No, he's not. William Barr is responsible for the court which let Berman, for that court in which Berman, the judge, exonerated Greg Craig and dropped one of his two charges, his paltry two charges, the same for which Paul Manafort rots in solitary confinement. Is this white pilling? I don't think so. I don't think so. Got a piece here from the Conservative Treehouse, and as all Conservative Treehouse pieces, it's very long, and Sundance does great work. I love Sundance to death, man. But he writes really long pieces, so I'm going to try to just zoom through this here real quickly. We're getting up way over an hour now, so my apologies, dear listener. I'll try to get through this. The title of Sundance's piece is, "Where is Huma Abedin's laptop?" Take it from the lead. It goes thus. An August 2018 release from the FBI vault on Hillary Clinton email investigation revealed the Anthony Weiner Huma Abedin laptop containing Clinton emails, 350,000 of them, and BlackBerry communications, 344,000 of those, was never reviewed for intrusion prior to the 2016 election. Does anyone at the FBI or DOJ even care about this issue anymore? Or was this can-kicking operation successful? First, the frustrating context. From the Boston Marathon bombing investigation through the San Bernardino terrorist attack, passing the Garland, Texas cartoon terror shooting, and continuing through Orlando's Pulse nightclub, and then through the Parkland shooting into Las Vegas via the Mandalay Bay, we always knew something was wrong with the apparatus, the institutional apparatus of the FBI. But it wasn't until 2017 with James Comey, Andrew McCabe, and the transparently corrupt Clinton exoneration and candidate Trump's setup scheme that we finally grasped the scale and scope of the corruption. God tier Sundance, perfectly written. It is disconcerting to accept that the institution of the FBI is corrupt, soup to nuts, including every aforementioned field office and participant therein. But reality doesn't care about our feelings. It just stares us in the face until we accept it. Talking heads always approach the FBI issues with a codependent and enabling qualifier. We're not talking about the field agents, they say. No, that's nonsense. If the institution is corrupt, then every entity therein is corrupt until such time as the corruption is removed. 50, quote, rank and file agents were working for special counsel Robert Mueller and Andrew Weissman. Has a single whistleblower been identified other than single supervisor special agent in the FBI who contacted the IG about how the Comey memos were being manipulated? All right, he goes on to talk about Andrew Ray here, and Christopher Ray here, and I'm going to skip this bit. I'm going to go down a little bit. Dang, this piece is so long. Anyway, what he's doing here, Sundance, is he is laying out the exact mechanism by which the Hillary Clinton emails via the Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner laptop were erased. Remember, that laptop was confiscated, right? We've talked all about this, right? Go back into prior episodes. We're not going to get into it again, right? We've talked all about Eric Prince, that shocking piece that I played from Breitbart where he talked about how the New York police had Anthony Weiner's laptop and they discovered Hillary's emails and all other kinds of salacious details involving corruption, involving Uranium One, involving pedophilia, involving all this kind of stuff. And the NYPD goes back to the FBI and said, yo, if you don't act on this right now, we're going public. And the FBI came back to them and said, yeah, you know what? Not so much. If you do this, we're going to take your cops downtown for murdering Eric Garner in the accidental death of when he was selling Lucy cigarettes on the streets of New York. Don't believe me, dear listener? Go back and listen to our reporting about it. Now, Sundance talks a lot about this, right? Now, what happened when Anthony Weiner went downtown for sexting a 15-year-old girl with his son on the bed, which is the creepiest damn thing I've ever seen in my entire... Actually, it's not the creepiest thing, but it's way up there. Everything about Anthony Weiner is creepy. Everything about Huma Abedin is creepy, right? Well, when he went down for that sexting scandal and sat in downtown in jail for approximately 14 months, I believe. I could be wrong. He was sentenced to 2 years, but got out in 14 months for, quote, good time. Oh, my God, he was such a good citizen of this jail. We just have to let him go. Well, that's what Eric Prince is talking about, right? Hillary's emails, the deleted emails, were found on that laptop. All other types of information was found on that laptop. It was all there, right? Now, that laptop theoretically exists somewhere, right? But we know that his cell phone and his iPad have disappeared. That's what Sundance goes on to detail. Whose fault is it that the cell phone and the iPad have disappeared? Okay, I don't even believe that Anthony Weiner's laptop exists anymore. I think it's off like a prom dress at this point in time. I think it is gone, absolutely gone, right? Whose fault is it that his cell phone and his iPad disappeared? Who is ultimately responsible for the maintenance of evidence for criminal prosecution in United States court? Oh, yeah, that's right. That would be William Barr. That would be William Barr. Now let's roll on a little bit. There was a, quote, bombshell that broke on Sean Hannity this week. Everybody's so happy about it. Me, not so much. I agree with Sundance about this 100%, right? Devin Nunes came out on, I believe it was Tuesday of this week. It may have been Wednesday, something like that. I'm just going to take the Sarah Carter piece from the lead. It goes thus. I was often smeared, Representative Devin Nunes, Republican California, told Fox News. And now what we know is there's a link between those who were doing the smearing and Fusion GPS. Okay. Now, let's listen to what Devin Nunes has to say here. I've got the right here. We're going to fast forward just a little bit.
And this is part of the reason why we have to go to the courts. We know that we spent $40 million.
Let me back this up. I went too far.
Steps that we continue to take because we have to go to the courts. Just like Jay Sekulow was saying, we have to go to the courts. It's our third branch of government. We're going to have to rely on them to fix a lot of this mess.
What do you think when Special Counsel Mueller didn't know who Fusion GPS was, nor did he know Jeannie Ray once worked for Clinton? Sarah's laughing. It's funny in one way, but it's not funny in a big way.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, look, the reason why he didn't know because he wasn't really engaged in this investigation the whole time. And this is part of the reason why we have to go to the courts. We know that we spent $40 million roughly investigating the Trump campaign, but at the end of the day, we don't have anything to show for it.
All right, let's just stop it right there. This is all nonsense. Nunes filed. I'm back to the Sarah A. Carter piece at sarahacarter.com. Nunes filed a $9.9 million federal conspiracy lawsuit in the Eastern District of Virginia. Smart move, alleging that the Fusion GPS was behind the anti-Trump Steele dossier, coordinated with another group to file several fraudulent and harassing ethics complaints intended to derail his investigation. Okay, that's true. That all happened. Okay. Now, all right, so the suit is legit. Dear listener, it straight up is, right? Essentially what was going on is that Devin Nunes was in the House in 2018 before the Republicans lost the midterms, leading the charge against Christopher Steele and Fusion GPS into how it was they spied on the Trump campaign, right? Okay. Then Fusion GPS was hired again to slander his name and bring up ethics investigations against him in the House of Representatives. That cost him his chairmanship of the House Judiciary Committee. It cost him his chairmanship, right? They also began releasing nasty notes about Devin Nunes' wife. They attacked his wife. That's a fact. This is all true, right? Now Devin Nunes is suing for them, or suing Fusion GPS, not for Fusion GPS. He is suing Fusion GPS, okay? Now, this is what I would call a pretty smart move. He's claiming defamation of character, slander, libel, and he's claiming that because of this, I was not allowed to complete the investigation. What he's hoping for that is in this process of this legal suit, in discovery, evidence will come forth about what exactly was going on with Fusion GPS. But Devin Nunes goes on to explain in this video that he has smoking gun proof that the Hillary campaign, that Perkins Coie, the DNC, that they all paid not only for the dossier, but that they paid for the smear campaign against him. Okay? Now, this is very white-pilling stuff. I'm just going to say, Mr. Nunes, way to go. Way to go. That's the way to bring the heat right there, Mr. Nunes. Right? There's only something with which I disagree just a little bit right here, dear listener. And that is this. You just heard Devin Nunes say it himself. We're going to have to go to the courts. We have to take independent action. We have to go to the courts. We have to sue for this information. William Barr can't be expected to do it on his own. We have to go out and get into the courts, and we have to do this also. Now, rhetorically, why exactly the F is it that William Barr cannot declassify this information himself, dear listener? Why is this? Let me spoil it for you. There is no reason. He can declassify this information. He has been given authorization by the president himself by executive order, and all intelligence agencies, including the director of national intelligence, now report to William Barr about the declassification of this information, and it's not happening, right? And so I assume that Devin Nunes here is kind of frustrated by this slow trickle of information, which the flow of this information is indeed controlled by William Barr. I assume that he's frustrated that now he's making his own lawsuit to try to get discovery of these documents legally so that he can get the information out there quicker. He can find out the answers to these questions quicker. I think he's a frustrated man. Now, we're in the home stretch right now, dear listener. Thank you so much for sticking in there with me, talking about all this arcane stuff about the Fed and all that. Thank you. Okay. We're almost there. Now, I'm not entirely black-pilled yet. As I said earlier in this broadcast, I'm not seeing results, and I am a results-based person. I'm not seeing it. Okay? I am willing to cut William Barr a little bit more patience, right? But dear listener, I'm not going to sit here and say to you, tick tock, drip drop anymore, because I don't see any reason to say it, because there are no drips, there are no drops, there is no tick, there is no talk. I am willing to trust Joe DeGeneva and Victoria Tensing and Devin Nunes for their opinions, for their work, and for their insight. But dear listener, things are starting to mount up. We just listed 5 areas in which William Barr has dropped the ball. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. How many more are there going to be? How long do we have to wait? I'm willing to be patient just a little bit longer, dear listener, and I would prevail the favor of your patience with William Barr as well. But I hope that you do agree with me and that you see the signs right there in front of your face, just like I do right here, that it's not getting done. But before we ride on, dear listener, I will leave you with one last white pill, and this is a white pill indeed. Remember, we just mentioned the DNI. The director of national intelligence was Dan Coates. He's resigned. He's completely gone now. As is his deep state backup. I can't remember her name, but I believe it was Susan Gordon or something like that. She also gone, right? People are resigning right and left. They're dropping like flies. Presumably, this is because of the investigation which Bill Barr is now leading. John Bull Durham is still the bull in the china shop, running roughshod, we assume. He is a bull. But we don't know anything yet. So, help me, John Bull Durham. You're my only hope. And let's just hope, dear listener, we do see ripples in the pool of things happening. Let's just hope it's correct. But dear listener, objectively, in terms of factual reportage, it's just not getting done. There are white pills here, but we're not seeing it yet. And dear listener, that's about all I've got for Bots, Thoughts, and Drops issue number 18. Sorry to end on kind of a grayish, blackish pill, but those are the facts right there, and I would never lie to you, dear listener. I would never lie to you. Let's see what happens. Let's be faithful. Let's be patient. And meanwhile, let's take care of ourselves. Let's have a good week this week. Let's make some money this week. Let's buy something for ourselves this week. Let's go take a dip in the pool this week. Let's go buy some whiskey this week. Let's go get a shot together this week, dear listener. Let's hang out together. Let's love each other. Let's be here for each other. And dear listener, I will be back before you know it.